when you're exposed to that show, as we were like through the movie, when you're like, 12 years old, you're like, this could not be more boring.
Every writer knows that the best conversations about writing don't happen in classrooms or symposia or any fancy artisanal setting. They happen at the bar, usually after deadline. That's the vibe we're going for here. This is The Other 51, a podcast about writing with me, Brian Moritz. This week, I'm joined by Anthony King, Tony-nominated co-writer of Beetlejuice The Musical. All right, Anthony, thanks so much for joining me this week. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
And first of all, congratulations to you, not only on the Tony nomination, which is awesome and something we'll talk about on its own, but on the news that came out last week that Beetlejuice, which you were a co-writer of, just got extended and is going to be in theaters until January. That's got to be really, really cool news to hear.
Yeah, we were just waiting to see, when, hoping that was going to all come together. And it's exciting. We'll be around at least till the end of the year, hopefully longer. We'll see.
That is excellent. And so my first question is we're gonna focus most of today talking about Beetlejuice the Musical. We'll get into some of the other stuff you've done as well. But I guess the first question I have for you is, what did Brigadoon ever do to you?
There's a... Scott, who I co-wrote the book of the musical with, and I came up. We've known each other since 8th grade and came up together, like doing musicals in high school and stuff. And there's something about those old-fashioned musicals that I think are what people think of as like still even now of like what most musical theater is beyond your Hamiltons or whatever. And it just keeps out such a huge part of the population, I think, because it feels so old-fashioned. And so,
and it's got such a great name to be able to throw in that line too. So
when you're exposed to that show, as we were like through the movie, when you're like, 12 years old, you're like, this could not be more boring.
So I wanted to get into kind of like the whole process of writing this show and working with Scott and working with Eddie Perfect and all that. But first, kind of in part for me, but in part for people who maybe aren't familiar with the Broadway process. So you guys co-wrote the book. What is the book of a Broadway show, and how does that interact with the score and all that?
Yeah, the book of the show is essentially the story, although there's some push and pull with that, obviously, with the composer. And then anything that is not song. So basically anything that happens on stage that is spoken or is kind of the choices of where the story goes and how it's a book. It's, I think, the most like, and I don't say this just because we're book writers, but it's the most misunderstood or not even, people don't even know it exists. Job in entertainment, I think. Most people probably can't name 2 book writers.
So how important and why is that so important to a Broadway show? Because obviously people think of the score and the music, and that's kind of what you take away and probably how people first experience a show. How does the book kind of play, and why is the book kind of so important to the success of a show?
Well, that's why it is like it's the thing that people aren't paying attention to is the not flashy part of the show, for the most part, because it's what sets up every song. It's what makes every song necessary. And in a bad book, you really can feel the handoffs, I think, between book and score can be really rocky. And so that's a big part of it is how do you, once you have these songs, how do you get us into those songs? And so it doesn't feel like that old school kind of terrible, like, well, let me tell you about it,
And specifically in this show, like not just working with Scott, but Eddie Perfect, who wrote the score and the songs. How does the process on something like this work? I mean, are you guys working all collaboratively? Is Eddie writing a song and then you're figuring out how to get there, or is it more organic? Yeah,
this was a kind of strange process, I think, in that Scott and I were on the project for a long time before Eddie came on board.
Okay.
And we wrote full scripts where we would kind of write and go, and then a song happens here, and we think it's this kind of song that does this kind of character or emotional work. And then when Eddie came on board, he wrote some of those songs, but then, of course, because Eddie is also a creative talent, also had ideas of like, I want to do this kind of song. And so then we would adjust the book to kind of get to those kind of songs as well.
Okay. Can you think of an example in the show where you remember that specifically happening?
I think a big one that's still in the show is that Eddie had this notion of starting the second act with a Girl Scout coming out on stage.
Okay.
And singing a song. That was not an idea that we had. And we had the idea from the beginning of a Beetlejuice Lydia teaming up and Beetlejuice creating clones of himself and this kind of stuff that happens on stage. But Eddie had this notion of like, I first want to just feel this innocence and have this song. And so there's like things like that you then go, oh, that's a really great idea. And so then you start adjusting the book to compensate for it.
All right. That's such a great moment in the show too.
Oh, it's so fun. It's I love the feeling in the audience. They're like, wait, what's happening?
So how much, when you were growing up, how much of a fan, or were you a fan of the movie before you even got connected to this project?
I mean, I watched it as a child and and always loved Beetlejuice, like, and especially also watched the cartoon as a kid. And so both those things, like, and we wanted to bring some of the spirit of the cartoon into the show. And so when we got asked to do it, it was more, there were two things. It was like, oh, what a fun sandbox to play in. And also we thought one of the things we had going for us was that people kind of remember that movie and remember liking it, but they don't really remember what happens in it.
Right.
And like Beetlejuice is on screen for about 15 minutes of the whole movie. And that's what people remember, is Beetlejuice. So that we felt like we had some leeway to kind of like play with the story and not just put the movie on stage.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that a little bit because the musical, for anybody who hasn't seen it, which is probably most of the people listening, it's not the Beetlejuice movie on a Broadway stage. Like it's its own different story. And it's funny, my wife and I were talking about it after we saw the show. And when you think about the movie Beetlejuice, you know, it's iconic and everything, but there's not really a plot to it. It's just kind of like, you know, Michael Keaton being amazing and Catherine O'Hara being awesome and all this stuff happening. But there's not really, like, you can't describe the plot to Beetlejuice. So, I mean, how much freedom within that context? It sounds like you would have, you know, there's this idea that you'd be constrained because it's Beetlejuice and everyone knows it, but plot-wise, you kind of had a lot of freedom, it sounded like, to kind of craft a story.
Yeah, I mean, the original title of the movie was House Ghosts. And it was, you know, it's a movie about two middle-aged couples fighting over a house, and it's kind of a riff on 80s wealth. But that's not a great emotional terrain for people to start singing.
Right.
Like the house. So, but when we came on board, the way this kind of project started was we knew Alex Timbers, who's the director of Beetlejuice, and he was talking to Warner Brothers about it, wanting to do it, and told them he wanted us to write it. And his big idea was to make Lydia and Beetlejuice the main characters. And so once that was kind of on the table, then it was on to us to go, how do you do that and keep it in the Maitland's house? How does it change the story and everything bend around it? Why is Lydia so obsessed with death, and what is, you know, how does it connect in? And so those were kind of the things we had to dive into. And all of the plot changes kind of came from that big choice of making Lydia the main character, because again, Winona Ryder's on screen for about 20 minutes of the movie,
right? And Lydia is really kind of the central character of the musical. And yeah. So how did you kind of break that and kind of break that story down? Now her mom dies in the show. It's kind of her central point. How did you guys come about that as the central kind of defining characteristic of her?
It's funny that was the big thing we had to crack, was that, and this is just an opinion I have, is that I think in movies you can have characters. You always need an active main character, but you can have, in movies, more can just happen to characters, and it can be slightly more reactive once they're in a situation. But in a musical, people have to sing about what they want, and it's such a spotlight on, like, literally opening up the emotional insides and spilling it all out. And so we felt like we needed, we couldn't have the Lydia of the movie who's just kind of disaffected and not happy with her life, but doesn't really want much of anything. So then that's how we got into like, well, Delia's not her mom, and so what happened to her mom, and is there a way in this spectral world when she realizes if you start disaffected and going, I don't like the way the world is, and then you find out the world's bigger than you thought it was because there are ghosts, how does that change what you're questing for?
So you kind of hinted at this, but I'm wondering if you could expand on like the writing for a musical versus writing for, I know you write for TV, movies, other things. How is the like the storytelling process and the writing process different when it's a musical versus the other media formats?
The biggest thing I think is that, again, characters sing their subtext. And so you just have to kind of paint in bolder colors, I think.
Okay.
That's not a probably completely fair thing to say, because there's obviously musicals that deal in a lot of subtlety, but I think there's you just have to move at a pace that is a little faster, so you have to get to emotional content faster.
Right. And it would seem too, like you said, there's subtext in very good musicals, obviously, but there's the I Want song in the musical, which is there's no subtext to it; it's all text. So,
it's straight out. This is what yeah. And it's funny, we had our original version of Beetlejuice had a lot more subtext, emotional subtext, and one of the things we learned when we were out of town with Beetlejuice in Washington D.C., where the show premiered, is the production of Beetlejuice was so bold and big and fun that the subtext was not coming through. You couldn't ask the audience to watch a giant sandworm come on stage and then also appreciate subtext.
So you mentioned the cartoon, and this is how deep in the stack we got after we saw the musical. We got the cartoons and watched all 3 seasons plus the Halloween DVD.
Wow.
And we're all in on this. And so how much did that because in the cartoon it's very much a Lydia and Beetlejuice kind of almost like a crime fighting duo, like they're very much together, and how much were you able to pull in from that and kind of help you expand the story a little bit?
Yeah, we always talked about he's like her magical dog, and so we wanted to have that feeling of them kind of being a team and Lydia being in charge, which feels like she is in the cartoon as well. And because of the real estate of a musical, we don't have that much time to stay in that area. But that's kind of what we were aiming at at the top of Act 2. Beetlejuice and Lydia have teamed up together, and are kind of running this haunted house together. And that was the spirit that we wanted to kind of have at the top of Act 2 before it all starts falling apart again.
Right. And one thing I want to mention, and I promise it's not just going to be telling you things we love about the musical, but my wife, we were talking about this morning, and my wife wanted me to tell you she loved the way you guys did the Netheworld in the show, and how it's irresistible to people who have died, like the Maitlands, and so how much that explains so much of the plot and explains why Beetlejuice is there, why he's trying to keep them there, why he hides the book from them. I just thought that was a really creative way to kind of establish that parameter of the plot.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of talk, obviously, in the movie, the Netherworld is kind of this functional DMV that, administrative nightmare. And we kind of talked about that to me, that is a middle-class, middle-age nightmare. Mm-hmm. And again, in a show where Lydia's the main character, that shouldn't be what the Netherworld is. Okay. And so that was a big shift too of like both what it is and also how it kind of functioned in the show.
Right. Is Lydia's mom in the Netherworld? It's never said in the show, but I'm curious. You don't have to give it away if that's a secret.
The idea is that everyone is in the Netherworld. Okay. But once you go into it, you are basically alone forever, but pleasantly alone, wanting nothing. And to contrast it with life, where we kind of all are forced together. We had a version of the show early on where she did meet her mother there. Okay. And we just found it was really fascinating that it was a really hard scene to write, and then we kind of realized that it was because it's gonna be maudlin. because that's not something that happens. Once someone's dead, you don't get to see them again. And so we ended up deciding it was much more interesting to have this quest that got fulfilled in an unexpected way through the connections of people that are still alive, rather than a magical, I get to say goodbye to my mom, which you don't get to do.
Right. It's a more meaningful completion of Lydia's story, that she decides to, and Home, I think is the song, she decides to go back home and to, go on with her life rather than continue this.
That's right.
So, kind of thinking on the movie, and like, if everyone who's seen Beetlejuice, like, you have like the moments in the movie you remember, the Deo scene, the Shakes and Nora scene, all like these the sandworms, all these like iconic little moments. You have to say iconic when you do an interview about Beetlejuice. I think that's a lot. So in going through, how did you guys decide what like iconic little parts you're gonna keep from the movie and which parts you're not gonna keep?
Yeah, we wanted to. There were things like we were like, well, it seems like the Big Deo dinner party thing is just so fun, and it is already musical. So if they're doing a musical of it, why not have it in there? And of course, Warner Brothers was happy about that as well. But we tried, I think, with almost every moment to repurpose it so that, like in the movie, the Deo scene is the Maitlands are doing it to them, and in our show, Lydia is already teaming up with the Maitlands to do it to them.
Right.
And it's really funny, if you watch that scene in the movie, Lydia's at the dinner table, but once someone starts singing, there's never a shot of Lydia. She disappears out of the scene.
Right.
And it's just an editing trick to not have her be under the spell. But which I thought was really fascinating, and watching the movie a million times, that it's like, even Tim Burton was like, yeah, it's not fun to see Lydia being manipulated by the Maitlands.
Right. So, and one of the things I did love, the little move that you made, was how you got how you introduced Shake Senora, which is the last song of the show and the last song of the movie. And because in the movie, it's just this kind of weird Tim Burton thing that happens at the end of the movie. But here, it's kind of like you connect it. It's almost a throwaway line, but you connect it to her. Lydia connects it. That was like her song with her mom, and it's a throwaway line in Act 1, and then Act 2 is the big where it comes back like it does in the movie, but it comes back really nicely.
Yeah, in the movie there's like a scene where the Maitlands are just playing a Harry Belafonte record.
Right, yeah.
And we obviously, on stage that's kind of tough to do, but we wanted, again, it's a musical, give it a little bit more emotional content, connected to her mom a little more. And the idea is, when it's set up in Act 1, it's what her mom had them all sing as they were first moving into their house in New York that they've left. And so the idea of like moving on and moving forward with the spirit of your mom, or the person who's died, but making your own thing. Yeah.
Was there a moment, you said you watched the movie a million times, probably getting ready for this. Is there something in the movie that you wanted to get into the story of the musical that just couldn't make it work?
I think like the biggest thing that I wish we had found a better way, and not a better way, but just a more of a way, is Otho. Because Otho's a character who in the musical is a much smaller part. And again, that came from, in the movie, the Maitlands and the Dietzes are the main characters. And so there's just more real estate for them. And in our show, with Lydia being the main character, it's like Otho becomes a tougher main character to have. And so we kind of tried to make him more of a Godot who actually shows up. But I also think personally that the way that character functions in the movie is a little bit dated, in very 80s depiction of that kind of character. And so we wanted to change that as well. But I wish we had the real estate to do more with Otho. So
how long were you guys working from when you first started writing? How long was it until you kind of got it to, I know DC, but how long were you working on this project before it even started performances or rehearsals?
It had a super long gestation process because there was a lot of just like time where nothing was happening. So we first had meetings on it about 8 years ago. But then we like I said, we had long periods where nothing was happening, and then we also had a period where there were other songwriters attached, and then that didn't work out, and so we had to wait for them to be unattached. And so there was just a lot of. But once Eddie came on board, it was about 3 years total to Broadway.
Okay, and I know you guys were in DC for previews, and I know I've read a lot about how the show changed from DC to what's on Broadway. So what was the DC version of this show like?
It was a much dirtier show.
Okay.
I think Beetlejuice was much bawdier and much more crass, I think.
Okay.
And in a way that unintentionally, I think, was coming across a little like fratty, like bro humor, in a way that was not intentional, but I think is how it was coming across.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I said, the biggest change to me from DC to New York was a lot of the emotional subtext we just brought to the surface a lot more for characters and put their emotional wants a little more clearly on stage. Because I think in DC the audience was kind of being told, sit back and let your head be blown back and don't think too much.
Okay.
And we wanted people, and then Lydia would sing a song that was emotional, and people would go, "But you told us not to care."
Okay.
And so we were trying. I think we worked on trying to those handoffs a lot. It was a big shift.
Okay. Now, how did you? Maybe a dumb question, but how do you get that feedback at previews? I mean, is there a survey? Do you talk to the audience? Is it just watching the crowd?
Yeah. We all of the above kind of. We are there watching the crowd and hearing what feels like it's connecting and when it's not. And also there's audience surveys that gave some feedback. And then, the big one was, I think, the Washington Post review, who he just really hated the show. And that was not that we agreed with everything he said, but it was more like, the show's not connecting, at least with that critic, in the way that we wanted to. And so how do we shift that around?
Okay. And kind of what's that like for you and for Scott and for Eddie? You've been working on this project for 8 years, really 3 years, writing, rewriting. You get to this point, and to find out that you need to be making changes. I mean, kind of on a personal level, what's that like for you?
It was interesting in that Scott and I had and we had talked about this with Eddie as well while we were in DC, that was the first time there was a full production. And so we realized pretty quickly that a lot of the emotional stuff wasn't getting to the audience. And so there were a lot of work we already knew we wanted to do. And in some ways that the reviews and everything gave us the room to do that work, because suddenly everyone was like, yeah, do work. But while everyone was kind of freaked out, we were in charge. We got to go in and just do the work. And so it was kind of freeing and exciting to be like, okay, we have a hard deadline. We did a massive amount of work very quickly.
Okay. And what was, where is there a place in the show where you can where you see the most changes happen, or you kind of had the toughest work to do in that time frame?
I think the biggest thing that I think helped shift the show was we rewrote the Maitlands. They were Beetlejuice. It was really funny. Beetlejuice in DC called them boring. Like he really didn't like the Maitlands.
Mm-hmm.
He would go, they're so boring. And we realized the audience just believed him.
Okay.
And so they didn't like the Maitlands because he didn't like them.
Okay.
And so just shifting his point of view to being like, aren't they great? Look how their lives are so just plain and simple. But we're going to team up together. Him being excited about them shifts the audience point of view as well. Just kind of a fascinating experiment of like who an audience grabs onto and who they're listening to.
Right. And how much of that rewriting and that work comes from seeing it on stage yourself for the first time?
Oh, so much of it. Because it's, you're until DC, we're just in a rehearsal room. And so you're kind of imagining the show. And it's once you first see this giant house come barreling down stage towards you, you're like, oh my God, look at that thing. You don't really feel the power of all of the visual aspect of the show, and then realizing how the story has to shift to kind of make sure it's all speaking the same language.
Gotcha. And how much in your writing in the 3 years, and maybe even more so in the rewriting after DC, I'm wondering how much influence do the specific actors that you have on writing it? Like writing something because Alex Brightman can do it, or because Sophia Ann Caruso, or Leslie, or any of the cast is brilliant, top to bottom. How much did they specifically write for them?
Yeah, I think once we knew who was playing all the roles, and then you see especially their comic rhythms, Scott and I did a lot of trying to write toward their strengths. And as you're rewriting jokes and feeling what's connecting and what's working is like, I don't ever want an actor to feel it's the worst feeling in the world to have a joke die and you're like, oh, it's our fault. The joke's not good enough. So when we would rewrite jokes and punch jokes up, we were totally writing toward their strengths, which I think, coming from a TV background, that's what you're doing all the time in TV. So, that was a fun process because there's the whole cast is so collaborative. And there are really funny people. And so it was really, really fun to do that.
Yeah. What was opening night on Broadway for you like?
I don't ever sit down and watch the show. I just pace in the back. And so opening night was the one time I sat down. And so that was exciting just to have to be forced to sit there. It was just really thrilling. And then, we were waiting to see how, theater is one of the few commercial art forms left where reviews matter. And so you're kind of waiting for those to come in and see how it's all going to play out. And we had mixed but good notices and some great ones as well. And so it was just a really fun night.
Yeah. And then the Tony, obviously you guys performed at the Tonys and that just seems to have given the show a nice boost too.
Yeah. It was really exciting to go once people saw what we were doing. Right. That's happened throughout. Is like I get that people are a little skeptical of like, oh my God, another corporate musical, right. Remake movie. But for the most part, once people get in the theater, they go, oh my God, this is so fun.
Right. So I actually, this is going to be random, but I have a non-Beetlejuice question. So the theater where my daughter does theater throughout the year, they had two guys who did Gutenberg the Musical a few years, maybe 2 years ago. And they got really excited when I told them I was talking to you today. And they had a very specific question about Gutenberg that they wanted me to ask you.
Okay.
What does Billy mean?
Do you mean it? Okay, so Gutenberg is a kind of a hard show to explain what it is, but there is the show is two idiots have written a musical that is like a Les Mis epic style musical about Johann Gutenberg inventing the printing press. And the show is them performing that show for Broadway producers they think are in the audience, hoping to take it to Broadway. And because they can't act, they have a table full of trucker hats with the names of every character on it, and they switch hats throughout the show. And at times when they're doing like big production numbers, they wear like 15 hats literally stacked on top of each other and switch them out, and it's a crazy thing. And one of the big moments that happens is there's a big kick line, and so there are a bunch of trucker hats tied to rope so that two guys can make what look like a giant kick line of imaginary people. And we thought it would be funny in that to have on one of the hats just the name Billy. Because just to see if the audience notices that there's a character in it that has not been in the show.
Okay.
And it is a reference to a number that was cut out of the show long ago that the monk sang when the show started at the UCB Theater and was a little more comedy, edgy comedy, that kind of comedy. So he's a character that was cut and then stayed on in the chorus line.
Excellent. And so with that show, how much? So it developed out of UCB. Was it more improv based, or then did you sit down and write the separate script for the musical for that?
Yeah, we wrote it. We always wrote it, but Scott and I performed it. And so every single week, any joke that didn't work, we would rewrite it. And so they just got honed so tightly because we were doing it every week. We would feel the pain of something not working, and so we would rewrite it. And so we did that for a while, and then a producer out of London said, "Could it be 2 acts? And you come over here?" And we were like, "Sure." And so we very quickly expanded it into a 2-act musical and went to London and performed it. And then it did really well there. And so then it came back to New York, and we got accomplished Broadway actors to do the roles.
So I ask every guest I have on this podcast this question. So I'll ask you, what's the best thing that you've read lately?
This thing I've read lately. You know what I've been reading, which has been really fascinating? I've been reading some of Dashiell Hammett's old Thin Man.
Oh, neat.
Screen treatments.
Okay.
And they're really fascinating because it's a kind of a process that doesn't happen anymore. And also he was just a raging drunk. So there's just parts that feel very phoned in and other parts that are really fleshed out. And it's just kind of like a fascinating walk through someone's mind. But that's I've been reading a bunch of those lately, and they're really interesting.
Yeah. So what is a screen treatment? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that.
They're essentially like thin novelizations of like what a screenplay would be built on. I think at that time that was done more often, where the scripts themselves were kind of just written by in-house studio writers based off screen treatments that were written by the person who would end up getting credited with the screenplay. I don't totally understand that process because it does not exist now, but it's kind of fascinating.
Excellent. Well, Anthony, this has been a delight. Thank you so much again for doing this with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
As always, thanks for listening to The Other 51. You can find show notes for this episode and all our episodes at sportsmediaguy.com on the Other 51 tab. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. I can highly recommend Overcast for this. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.